All right, let's get into it. Today we're talking about a true literary comet, the French poet Arthur Rimbaud. This is a guy who burned brighter than almost anyone in history. And then, just like that, he vanished.
To really get a handle on Rimbaud, you have to throw out that image of a stuffy 19th century poet. Seriously. Think of him as the original teenage rebel, a force of nature who basically showed up with one mission, to smash every single rule he could find. He was punk before punk was even a thing.
So where does a force like that even come from? Well, our story kicks off in 1854 in this small, kind of boring French town called Charleville, and right from the get-go, his entire life was a tug-of-war between two massive opposing forces.
Yeah, look at this. It really lays out the conflict perfectly. On one side, you've got the cage. That's his mother, Vitalie. After his dad took off, she clamped down with his suffocating, super religious control. But then, on the other side, you had the key. That was his teacher, a guy named George Isambard, who saw the blazing genius in this kid and opened up this incredible world of literature and ideas, which, as you can imagine, his mother absolutely hated.
That cage was never going to hold him for long. At just 16 years old, he makes his first real break for it. No money, no ticket, he just jumps on a train, headed for Paris, the city he'd been dreaming of. Naturally, he gets arrested and tossed in jail. And who had to come bail him out? His teacher, Isambard. You see, this wasn't just some kid running away from home. This was the opening shot in his lifelong war against conformity.
So while he's physically trying to break free, he's also building this intellectual weapon for his revolution. And it all comes together in his famous Seer Letters, where he lays out this completely new, totally radical idea for what poetry should be.
So here's the core of it. For Rimbaud, a poet wasn't just some guy who was good with words. A poet had to become a voyant, a seer, a visionary, someone who could actually access a reality that's hidden from the rest of us. The big question, though, is how in the world do you do that?
And this is his shocking answer. This wasn't about waiting for a muse to strike. It was about forcing it. It was a conscious, systematic, and get this, rational process of messing with everything. Your sight, your sound, your taste, all of it. The idea was to break through the boring surface of reality to find the unknown on the other side. It's an absolutely wild idea.
Armed with this new philosophy, he basically takes aim at the entire literary world. The Parnassians, he called them cold, rigid, and boring. The Romantics, he blasted them for being whiny and self-indulgent. The only one who got any respect was Baudelaire, who he called a king of poets, but even he was trapped by old, stuffy forms, according to Rimbaud. You have to remember, this is a teenager telling the entire world of French poetry, you're all doing it wrong. The nerve.
So after declaring war on the old guard, this 17-year-old prodigy sets his sights back on Paris. And that's where he ignites a relationship so brilliant and so destructive, it would go down in history. His affair with the 27-year-old poet Paul Verlaine.
It all kicked off when Rimbaud mailed a few of his poems to Verlaine, who was already a big name. And Verlaine was just completely floored by the raw genius. He didn't just write back. He summoned him to Paris with these passionate words, even sending money for the train ticket. The fuse was officially lit.
Their relationship was just a whirlwind of creative genius and total chaos. Verlaine literally abandoned his wife and newborn child, and the two poets just ran off together, living this wild, bohemian life in London and Brussels. Their days were just a blur of absinthe, hashish, incredible artistic breakthroughs, and absolutely vicious fights. It was a creative furnace, for sure, but it was burning them both to the ground.
The whole thing came to a head in a hotel room in Brussels. They were having another awful fight. Rimbaud said he was leaving for good, and a drunk, desperate Verlaine pulls out a pistol and shoots him in the wrist. And the consequence for that? Paul Verlaine was sentenced to 2 years in prison.
But here's the incredible thing about art, right? From the ashes of this literal hell, Rimbaud creates his masterpiece, A Season in Hell. He took all that raw pain, that betrayal, that psychological torment, and he channeled it into this revolutionary work that would change literature forever. He didn't just write about hell, he dragged you down there with him.
So after hitting this unbelievable creative peak, after basically rewriting the rules of poetry, Rimbaud does the most shocking thing you could possibly imagine. At 19 years old, he just stopped. He walked away from the literary world and never looked back.
And this wasn't just him taking a little break. No, this was a complete and total rejection of everything he had done. Years later, when somebody asked him about his poems,
which were already becoming legendary back in Paris, he just dismissed them with total contempt, saying it was all nonsense and lies. He completely turned his back on his own genius.
I mean, just look at this contrast. The transformation is absolutely staggering. The visionary boy poet, the one they called the man with souls of wind, became this hardened, pragmatic merchant. He wandered the globe, working as a soldier, a quarry foreman, and eventually a trader, some say a gun runner, in the deserts of Ethiopia and Yemen. The abstract world of poetry was gone, replaced by the brutal, concrete world of just surviving.
And the proof is right there, in his own handwriting. His letters from Africa are stripped completely bare of any art. There are no dazzling metaphors, no surreal visions. It is all business. He's writing about profit margins, trade routes, the brutal heat, his failing health. It's like the poet inside him had been completely and utterly erased.
But here's the thing. You can't erase a legacy that powerful. Even while he was out in Africa trying to forget his past, his work was kicking off a revolution back in Europe. So let's talk about the tragic end of his life and the immortal influence he couldn't escape.
The final chapter is just cruelly ironic. The man with souls of wind, the guy who spent his life wandering the globe, was now completely immobilized by pain. He got a cancerous tumor in his knee in Africa and had to make this one last agonizing journey back to France. They amputated his leg, but it was too late. The man who lived a dozen different lives died in a hospital at just 37 years old.
And yet, in a literary career that lasted, maybe 5 years tops, he changed everything. He became a kind of patron saint for the symbolists and then the surrealists. His way of breaking down form laid the groundwork for modernism. Decades later, you've got the Beat generation, guys like Jack Kerouac, looking to him as a hero. And that rebellious spirit goes right into rock and roll, with people like Jim Morrison and Bob Dylan idolizing him.
So this brings us to the ultimate, haunting question of his life. After trying to find absolute truth by deranging his senses and blowing up language, did he just fail? Did he decide it was all a lie and just run away into the hard reality of making money and staying alive?
Or, and this is the idea I really want to leave you with, did he actually succeed? Maybe he realized that no written word, no matter how brilliant, could ever be as true as a human body suffering under the African sun. Maybe he didn't abandon poetry at all. Maybe he just decided to live it, trading the written poem for the unwritten one, lived out in flesh and blood.